Hey guys, welcome to another episode of She Knows Arsenal. I'm Jessica and I'm your host, and you can follow me on Twitter at It's Jessinho. Today we're going to be covering, doing a post-match episode about our 0-0 draw against Manchester United. And today I have the pleasure of talking to Mike McDonald and Drew Thompson. So let's get started. Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey, good afternoon.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and jump in with our thoughts on the lineup. So before the game, it seemed like the mood was pretty down because it kind of seemed like the fan base wasn't sure if we were going to be able to get a result without key players like Saka and Tierney and Aubameyang. And personally, I feel like Saka was due a rest after playing about 27 games for us. And we need to get the rest and rotation right if we're going to push on for the rest of the season. And personally, I'd much prefer to have a stronger full strength lineup against, I think it's Wolves, Villa, and Leeds, which is our next games. I think those are must-win games. So, Mike, what were your thoughts on the lineup when you saw it?
Well, I was concerned at first because I didn't know about Saka. I'm not sure anybody knew about Saka until it happened. But I'm with you, Jess, in the fact that he needs to be rested and the games don't get any easier. So might as well rest him now so he doesn't break because he's been one of our players of the season. I was disappointed with Tierney, more so because I'm not a huge fan of Hector Bellerin. And I wanted Cedric. I see Cedric on the right side. And I think that would actually help to improve the form. So disappointed there, but apart from that, everything was good. I think there were players like Luiz and Xhaka have deserved their opportunity to stand the team, and I'm sure they also. But just the fact that our team looks more like a squad now with more than just 13 or 14 players playing well and deserving minutes. There's a larger group now, so. The lineup isn't as big a concern to me now as it has been in the past.
I agree with that. Drew, do you have anything to add to that? About your thoughts on the lineup?
No, I don't have a lot of thoughts. I kind of feel like my reactions to a lot of the frustrations from the fan base at the moment are kind of, I don't know, I think reactions are overstated. I feel like this is probably the best lineup we could have come up with, given a certain set of circumstances, Oba not being available, Saka in desperate need of a rest, Tierney not really available as well. So, and we put players in positions where they've proven that they can at least be serviceable. So, I mean, obviously, Cedric is a right back, and it's not ideal that he plays left back, but he's done okay there. So it's hard to really, hard to argue against that. And then Pepe performed, he has to show something, right? And then you need to give him the opportunities to show something. And now that he's trying to do that, and whenever he's getting minutes, it's a good thing. So you kind of almost want to work him into form as well. So I'm not really sad about it, honestly. I kind of feel like, I don't know, it speaks to my overall kind of frustration at times. I kind of just feel like not everything is going to be perfect every single day with the club. Not everything is going to be as ideal as humanly possible. That's not how professional sports works. That's not how football works. There has to be some measure of give and take, right? So I think we feel the best possible 11, and I think the result kind of reflected that. And you can maybe make the argument that if we were at our completely full strength level, maybe we would have actually gotten 3 points. You don't really know. That's a whole other debate for later, but I'm not frustrated with it. I think, and you see the things that we've done, you can take the positives away from it. I think any reaction pre-match was just reactionary at best. I think, it's just like very, very not balanced at all. So, no, I was fine with it, honestly. I really had no issues.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. I definitely thought that was the best that we could have done under the circumstances. And I agree that nothing is going to be perfect. And it's a long season. and we're going to need our players to be rotated and rested. So we have to take care of our players, and if they're not fit, they can't play. And it's that simple. So moving on, I think the first half was evenly matched, and each team had their spells, of domination within that half. And it seemed like our bright spot throughout the first half and really the entire game was Pepe. And at the end of the game, he ended up having the most fouls won at 4, the most shots at 4, and the most chances created, and he had 3 of those. Mike, what did you think about Pepe's performance and his overall resurgence in the last 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, it was super encouraging, and it's come, as Drew said, at exactly the right time, because he's running out of time, quite honestly. And with the signing of Erdo, he's going to probably rotate as a wide option, maybe in Pepe's position, as well as a number 10. So, hey, there's nothing like competition beyond the coach giving you a hard talking to motivate somebody to realize how real this is. And as I wrote about this morning, Pepe is going to be an Arsenal player or a Bayer Leverkusen player, perhaps, or I don't know where he may end up, but it's not going to be a club that's greater than Arsenal until he finds some level of form. And so I'm encouraged for Arsenal. I'm encouraged for him. I've been championing for a while that he plays as an inside forward. I see Mo Salah play, and I see Pepe. And Mo Salah's level of consistency, his only consistent game this season for Arsenal. But I see the skill set that Mohamed Salah brings to football, and I see the same skill set in Pepe. That Salah is a good winger, but he's far better if you bring him inside the box, 15 yards in, and let him have his first touch inside the box, because he's one of the best finishers in the league, maybe the best in the positions. And I see the same in Pepe. His best quality is his finishing, not his wing play. He's got a horrible tendency to slow down too long. And I totally get you have to slow down to make the defender slow down. But you can't slow down as long as he wants to, and he gathers a crowd, doesn't he? And so I was encouraged he played on the left in the previous game, because that brought the ball away from the traffic rather than towards it. But he was far more intelligent. And just like I said, I've never seen that guy play with consistency. And so if Pepe doesn't want to become Gervinho, who was a super similar player statistically and to the eye, where he would have a game where he was the good, the bad, and the ugly. If he doesn't want to be that guy, then he needs to find consistency within the game and make better decisions. But he certainly is given that opportunity if he plays inside rather than outside. So that's my thoughts on that one.
Awesome. So, Drew, in your opinion, what do you think Pepe gives us as a forward that maybe Aubameyang or Martinelli doesn't give us? Because it seems like he might have a little bit of an X factor.
It's kind of tricky for me, because I'm kind of the opinion that he's kind of one of those players where it's got to be from the manager. It has to be. It can't just be what the manager wants, right? I don't think Pepe is the kind of player who can slot into every kind of system, or at the very least, every kind of tasking in that system. His instructions have to be a little bit different on his flank, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You don't want 2 wingers operating in the same way usually. For me, I think he needs to be on the ball more. And as kind of Mike was pointing out before, he's a player that has to come in centrally. He has to. A lot of his game is predicated on getting into dangerous scoring positions. He's not, he can give you an assist every now and then. He did so a little, but he really is an inside forward. He really wants to get into the final third and really contribute in terms of his goal return. And you kind of really need that, but he's expressive on the ball. He can be expansive on the ball. He can drive play. Whereas someone like Oba is more of like when you put him out wide, he's a wide forward who has to rely on the chances you create. Pepe can create his own chances, which Oba kind of struggles to do with any regularity. And also, I think Pepe can combine and play a little bit better. He also will drag defenders if you give him the time and space on the ball. He can actually make something happen for himself and then get someone out of their shape. So for me, I think that's what he can provide. I think Martinelli gives you similar on the other flank if he was in. And we've seen the same thing with Saka as well. I think Oba's kind of an anomaly as to where it's not that he's not a poor player. No one will sit there and ever say Oba's a poor player, but Oba is he's a very specific type of player when you don't use him as a center forward. But someone like a Pepe has more ways that he can hurt you and affect the match, where it's not just, late run the area, get on the end of a service. Pepe is there's more to his game than that. And I think the struggle for him has been because he hasn't really found his footing at the club. You can make arguments that he wasn't, well, not arguments, we know for a fact that he wasn't the player that Emery wanted. There may have been a reason for that. He didn't really suit his first season here. He struggled under Arteta initially as well. So this is kind of what I mean. Like, it's got to be a bit of give and take. He has to make the adjustments to be able to find his place in Arteta's system, but at the same time, Arteta has to do enough to make sure that he's doing enough with the schematic to highlight what Pepe is good at, or else there's no point in playing him, right? You want to get the best out of all your players, right? It's not just about fit to what I'm trying to do. I also have to be cognizant of the fact that certain players offer certain qualities. How do I get those best qualities? How do I make them highlight in my system as often as possible? We haven't found that balance with Pepe yet. If we find that balance, I think he'll come good. In terms of the ability he can bring to the team, which we haven't really seen consistently yet. So someone just pointed out, he is young still, which is great. He's still 24. He still has a lot of growing to do. He's not even close to his prime yet. So, good point. Sorry, 25 rather. So I would say 25 is still pretty young. You still have 2 to 3 years before you're really hitting your stride in your career, your real stride in your career. So, I think a lot of people have given up on him, and there have been times where I've been frustrated and I've said, come the summer, if he's not really settling 2 years into his deal, you might look to move him on potentially. But I think the ball's kind of in his court now. If he does get the time and he does have the opportunities and he does do what he can do, then I think you want to keep him around. But for now, I'm just happy about the fact of here and now. Is he performing well? Not as well as he can be, but he's trending up in his performances, and that's kind of what you want to see. So how he comes on in the next one of matches kind of tells the tale. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what both of you guys said. And for me, when I look at Pepe, like from a long-term standpoint, the best case scenario for us is that he hits some form right now and helps us get to the end of the season and we see kind of where he is. If he's playing well and he's getting playing time, that's good for us, whether we keep him or not. I don't think we can really use 2 games of good performances to be able to make a decision whether we should keep him or not, because we've seen Pepe play maybe 1 or 2 good games and then kind of fall off a cliff after that. So I do think that this is good for us no matter what, and I do hope that he keeps up the form. And for me, I would like us to be able to keep him, but like I said, if we don't keep him and we do need to sell him in the summer, it's better if other teams are able to see him in a better light, than this player that we bought for 72 million that just can't even get in the squad over Willian. You know what I mean? So I think it's a good thing. So in the comments section, you guys, I'm going to ask the question to the guys, but I want your guys' opinion too on, so when Aubameyang comes back in, does he get the spot on the left-hand side, or does Pepe keep the spot if he is still in good form? So I want to give that question to the comment section, but I also, or the chat box, but I want to ask you guys, when Aubameyang comes back, does he come straight back in, or does Pepe keep playing because of the form that he's in? I think the Southampton game and the Manchester United game showed us a different kind of front line that we could have with somebody like Pepe, who's a little bit more technical, and that could be beneficial in our build-up play, versus a low-touch player like Aubameyang. He's more of like the final touch player that's just going to finish off the move. So, Mike, what do you think? Do you think that Aubameyang comes straight back in, or do we continue to play Pepe?
Well, if Pepe continues to play consistently well through 90 minutes, every 90 minutes that he's allowed to play, that would be harsh. Of course, it would be more harsh to drop Saka. But of course, Saka, as we mentioned before, needs a rest. And I'm sure if he's fit on Tuesday, he'll play. He's going to need an elongated period where he gets to rest maybe for a week or otherwise he's probably going to break. So and I think probably if you've got everybody fit and ready, I think it'll depend on one thing, which is goals. As simple as that, really. Aubameyang offers that far greater than anything else he has to bring to the table. So if Arsenal winning games look like a goal threat and scoring goals, I suppose, then you could save his legs a little longer, rest him, and reward the players that have been playing well around him. But if we're not scoring goals or not looking like we can score goals, then I don't think you have a choice. I think you've got to bring him back because, as Drew said, his game is fairly narrow, isn't it? He doesn't really offer a whole lot beyond the goals, but that's what the game's about, is the goals. And if he offers the most important piece of the game, is more consistent at it and makes the coach believe that that's what's going to happen. I don't really think you've got a choice. The other thing I'd say, I forgot, back there is concussion. So you've got a situation where Aubameyang has not, tell me if I'm wrong, guys, but I don't think Aubameyang has played for any period of time with Smith Rowe as a 10. And to me, I didn't see the point of playing Aubameyang without a 10 because he needs the short slot passes, same with Lacazette, really. And he's not going to show any form of physicality in the box. He avoids physicality. So he needs those cute little passes that I think Smith Rowe and even more so Ødegaard will bring. So I'd love to see maybe take Lacazette's spot once Lacazette recovers from his concussion. And then throwing into the mix that just read on Twitter that they said Aubameyang may be back to the lead game because of the protocols. So that's a bunch of information that's probably all contradictory, but I'll hand it over to Drew.
Drew, what do you think?
For me, I guess it's about balance, but it's also about rewarding form, and it's also kind of going to be about who's available. And as we've just discussed, like we don't know what's going to happen with Lacazette. What's the nature of the head injury he's maybe sustained? Oba's not going to be available just yet because he had the quarantine. So we have that scenario. But I kind of feel like for me, it's interesting because like Oba in his best iteration, even when you play him as a center forward, he needs a creative player just like behind him. And you saw that kind of when he was at Dortmund. And even though Dortmund usually play with a 4-3-3, they had a creative player, a direct creative player in midfield, someone who was more of like an 8-10 hybrid, who was the head of a midfield three who would get into those key positions, who would get him on the end. It wasn't just about getting Dembele the ball out wide or getting Royce the ball out wide. It was about, getting the creative player in the middle as well. Someone like Kagawa as an example. So we kind of feed him in. That was actually really important. But again, Dortmund didn't really play against low blocks all the time. Low blocks aren't a key feature in Bundesliga, but they are in Premier League. So it's a little bit different, right? So Oba as a center forward, it's almost better to play him out wide, I feel like, because it's probably a little bit easier to get him into a dangerous position when he's out wide rather than when he's in the center, because it's harder to play against a low block when you're not an expansive center forward. That's why Man City with Pep, they've always wanted a forward who can come deeper, who is good on the ball, who can bring others into play. I think it's why Arteta has persisted with Lacazette as a center forward. Usually when he's available, even when he's not been in form, he's still gone with Lacazette more often than not because of that fact. There has to be more to your game when you're playing against low blocks when you're a center forward, right? But if you're out on the left, you can, if a move comes off in the final third, you can get in on the end of something when you're coming off left and you're sitting a little bit, kind of in the left half space. You can get on the end of something, whether it's from the center forward or from that combination play that you see from Emil Smith Rowe and Saka that's been developing on the right. Then there's that cut back, and then Oba scores that goal. He scored a textbook Oba goal in that same variation, just the match previously. I think that's when you're looking at him at his best. But on the flip side, if Pepe's been in form and everyone is fit, it's hard to say you want to drop him. I kind of feel like, and you don't want to drop Lacazette right now. I feel like this is probably some of the best football we've seen from him since he's come to the club. He's the club leading goal scorer in the league this term, so it's difficult. But I also think it depends on who you're playing against as well. If you're going to be playing against a low block, then Lacazette's there. But if you're going to be playing against a more expansive team to where maybe we don't have the ball, say we're playing against City as an example, just as an example, not that we are, but you might want to go with Oba because we might want to be able to sit a little bit deeper and be more direct and play on the counter, and then Oba shines in that kind of iteration. So the good thing about this is we're having a debate about options, and we didn't really say we could really have that debate maybe a year or two ago. So the fact that we do have options and we can really kind of taper our game to who we're playing against, that's really important. I think that's something Arteta's been trying to do little by little, incrementally over time, moving forward. That's important. So I don't quite know who we necessarily should be going with moving forward, but I do feel like if we do see Oba, I don't think it's going to be as a center forward anymore. I think he's going to be out on the flank, and that's kind of where he has to be, not just where he should be. So, but again, if things come off tactically, you can still get him goals, but it does take a little bit of like rejigging what you want to do when you're in possession, but it doesn't mean he's going to be useless, but it just requires a little bit of tinkering. So
I've got a question for you guys in regards to Oba. Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the necessity as the season draws on to lean into the guy that got the 3-year contract over the guy that probably is not going to be given a new contract in Lacazette?
Just go first. That's fine.
I think we'll end up having to do that anyway, because I think I know I've said this a couple of times, but I think Lacazette is just going to end up running his deal down, and Aubameyang has 3 years. So I think eventually Aubameyang, when we get to a point where we're playing, maybe when Arteta's gotten more of his type of players in, Aubameyang will move back up top, and he'll just kind of fill in there. It really just depends. But at the moment, I just think that Lacazette fits because we don't have enough technical players in our midfield. We're not able to play two attacking 8s and a 6. We can't play that right now. We're playing with 2 more defensively minded midfielders. So you're taking away a technical player and somebody to go forward. So you need Lacazette there to help build up play. I think eventually, if we were playing more like a Man City, where we have 2, like a De Bruyne and a De Bruyne and a David Silva type, and then you just have maybe Partey sitting in, then if you have that additional technical player, then you can afford to just have Aubameyang there as a low touch. Even Leicester to me is similar to that. They have more technical players around. They have a Tielemans and Maddison in their midfield, so they can afford to have Vardy up there, not really a part of build-up play. As long as we don't have, I guess, at least 4 technical players out there, I think you need to keep Lacazette in. And in regards to the contracts, I just think we're stuck with the contract, and I know we should probably be leaning into it, but we also need to win games, and whatever's working, I think we should stick with it. Aubameyang will be good for some games, and he's better out on the left at the moment, so we'll see. But at the moment, I wouldn't really lean into the contract. I would go with what's working. So I would just stick with Lacazette. Drew?
Yeah, I kind of agree, but the only difference the thing I disagree with is that teams like City and Leicester can afford 2 more technical players in midfield because they actually have out-and-out defensive midfielders in their team. City have Rodrigo, Leicester have Ndidi. We have Partey, and people need to understand Partey is not a defensive midfielder. He is not. He shouldn't be at the base of a midfield 3. He wasn't at Atletico Madrid. That's not where he's best. He is very calm on the ball. He can distribute. He can beat the press when he's on it. Those are all good things. But as you've seen when he's tried to work himself into matches, he likes to get forward. You see him within 30 yards of goal regularly. That's not a defensive midfielder for me. He's not going to be like a Fabinho sitting deeper as well. He wants to go on and affect play. He wants to kind of get into more dangerous positions, and that's where he's best at.
What if we got somebody like Basuma? Then would it work?
Then I think it would work, because then I think you could have Basuma kind of sitting, and then you have Partey alongside someone who's more technical. But I don't know if that's even something we would necessarily do, because I keep trying to tell people this, but Arteta rates Granit Xhaka. So unless we're going to upgrade on Granit Xhaka, it's kind of almost like a moot point. He's going to be in the team. So, and then I feel like if you do that, if you have like a Xhaka, Partey, Basuma midfield trio, then you're lacking in midfield balance, and then it's a bigger problem. that's more of a midfield three that you have when you're a strict counterattacking side, and we're not. We're going to be the opposite. We might be able to counter, but Arteta wants possession. He wants to be able to break teams down. He wants technical quality in midfield. So, I think for me, Oba is just going to have to be kind of out on the. I think we're going to keep playing with Oba and Laka in the same primary first team. In our best team, I think you'll see both of them with Smith Rowe and whoever's kind of in form on the right, or whoever's fit, really, Saka or Pepe, depending. Long term with the contract, I kind of feel like, I don't know. I'm kind of torn because, like, we know the club's finances are issue. It's an issue right now. So unless we start selling a bunch of assets to fund it, replacing someone like Lacazette is not going to be easy. I don't think Nketiah is the one to be able to do it long term. We don't know if Balogun's going to be at the club, and if he is, how long he's going to take to get to that level. I don't think Oba suits as a center forward, even if we kind of tweak the players we have in the 11. I still don't think he suits what Arteta wants out of center forwards. We're going to have to buy a new one. It almost makes sense to give Lacazette a 1-year extension.
Wow, yeah.
And then see kind of how that fits. But at the same time, it doesn't mean he wants it either. You know, he could easily go back and walk into Lyon's 11 and close out his career at a club with a fan base and with an owner that love him. So, you know, and that can kind of extend his career as well. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to handle that. That's more of a, I could probably give a better answer for me in the summer, how I kind of see that playing out. I think there's so many factors that come into that. It's hard to answer now, when, you know, in February, essentially. So I'm not quite sure. But on the flip side of it, I do think, like, just because we gave Oba that extension and his pay bump doesn't mean he needs to be starting. If he's not in form, he doesn't start. But I'm coming at you from that opinion as someone who coaches. Like, I don't care how good my players are. If you're not in form or you're not training right, I'm not going to start you. You know, that's just like, I think that you kind of have to have that across the board. So I kind of feel like you take it 1 week at a time and see how it goes. You know, if Oba's form kicks up again, then of course you want to play him. But, you know, before recently, he was in dire form. And I think the only reason why he wasn't, the reason why we were persistent is because we didn't really have another option to really play on that left-hand side. I think if Martinelli was fit all season and in form, I think you would have seen Oba drop maybe a bit sooner. Or in general, you know, I don't really know. But yeah, again, we're talking about options, which is for me the kind of the positive takeaway that we're talking about options instead of being forced to persist with certain things, which is, I think, a lot of the frustration that came from the fans for the last couple of years. Now we're talking about things that we can do in certain scenarios, which is a good thing. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I did want to touch on, you know, the Martinelli sub for Willian, and there was a lot of, I guess, confusion and a little bit of discontent from the fan base seeing Martinelli being taken out at halftime and Willian being brought on. And after the game, Arteta did say that it was a tactical decision, so Martinelli was not injured. Drew, in your opinion, what do you think Arteta was trying to achieve tactically with Willian that he was unable to do with Martinelli?
I don't honestly know. Maybe you could probably say that, at least on the strength of it, for surface of the data, you could argue that historically Willian is more of a creative player. Martinelli is more of a winger that wants to drive play when it's on the ball, but Willian, you could argue, is maybe a bit more creative. So maybe it was that. I don't actually know. That's kind of a tough one, but or maybe you know, another set piece option for all we know. I'm not quite sure. You know, Arteta didn't offer like a ton of, you know, insight behind what the tactical decision was or why, and obviously that's his choice not to. So I have no problems with that. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was kind of it. Maybe Williams more likely, maybe because he wants to maybe hold the ball up a bit more to allow for things like maybe an overlapping run or more combination play to get United out of the shape. Yeah, apart from Martinelli, who wants to kind of pick up the ball and kind of run a bit more, which isn't a bad thing. But sometimes you can run yourself into odd situations where you find yourself 1v2 because you took a few extra touches and all of a sudden the move doesn't come off because you've kind of put yourself into the defensive trap. So
He
Yeah,
also
that
gave the ball away in a really dangerous position. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he was like kind of right on the top of the box and gave the ball away. It didn't end up in a goal, but it really could have. I think it ended up with maybe Thomas getting a foul right at the edge of the box there. And maybe, he just is a little bit off the pace. Martinelli is he's coming off of a big injury, and he's not really up to full fitness, and I think it was just the sight of Willian, I think sometimes just makes the fan base just kind of like, but he did the great defensive header, but I do think he was a little missing in that first half. I don't really think he had the best first half. I think he probably could have grown into it, but when Arteta says it's as a tactical decision instead of an injury, you start to question it a little bit to try to see like what is in Arteta's mind, what is he thinking that he's going to get from Willian that he can't get from Martinelli. So that's why I asked that question, and Mike, what did you think of Willian's performance when he came on? Do you think he's getting better, or do you just think our expectations are really low?
Well, it was better. He's nowhere near being the solution, is he? But actually, I think he came on because Martinelli was tardy in his defensive efforts, and that the moment that he saved a possible goal there with that sprint back, everyone was applauding him for that, and I don't think the coach was. I think the coach needed him back in that position early and was upset with him because he wasn't in that position. And there were a couple of other moments in the game that I saw Arteta seem to be pointing at him and directing him and trying to get him to understand his defensive responsibilities, and I think that's why he came off. As for Willian, it was better, and it's going north, I hope, and it will continue to do so. I was very excited when he joined Arsenal because I've thought for a while that Arsenal need better experienced players. That's the problem at Arsenal. The experienced players were either toxic or just not very good. And, he was doing very well with Chelsea and created the most chances last season at a good Chelsea team. And so I thought, well, here's a better experienced player showing up. But I don't know. It's as if he has no interest in playing for our red shirt and seems to want to wear the blue one again. He just seems to be sad all the time. So I suppose I was very encouraged. But still, to be honest with you, Jess, there was only, still 2 or 3 moments that were glimpses of the old Willian. It wasn't anything that would make me want to put him back on the field anytime soon. But, hey, let's be happy. It's better, yeah?
Yeah. Drew, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. I think someone mentioned something about some audio being picked up in the match about comments that Martinelli he just doesn't defend well, so run out of his zone, and maybe that could also be why he was brought up as well. And again, that's part of the game that not all players that are his age excel at in his age bracket. That takes a lot of developing to do to be a winger who can come back and defend well, not just come back and just maybe look like you're defending. It's a bit different than when you track back and if you're in the right zone, rather than if you're tracking back smartly to know how to actually read the match when you don't have the ball and what to do and where to be. So not necessarily wouldn't necessarily surprise me either. But then again, it's interesting because if we're going with the notion that we criticize Martinelli for his defensive performance, not a lot of people do that about Oba either. He's also not very good without the ball when we don't have the ball. So I think we have to make sure that the standard is high across the team. And I think that goes back to something you were saying as well. We have to make sure that moving forward, we kind of don't pander to certain aspects of a player off the pitch, whether it be contract or popularity or whatever it is, hold everybody to the right standard, right? So I think long-term, that's something Arteta will do. And in regards to Willian, kind of yet again, Again, I'm with Mike, and I'm sure people have gone back and found the tweet where I was being positive about the Willian signing, and it's along the same thoughts that Mike has. It's like, you could question a lot of the veterans we've had over the last couple of years. I do think if you look at the data, it showed that Willian does give us something we needed at that time. I wasn't happy with certain aspects of it, like maybe the finances behind the wage. I mean, that's notwithstanding, but for base value, for the type of player that Willian was, more often than not, it solved the problem at the moment. It hasn't come off how we wanted it to. It doesn't mean it won't come off the way we want it to. And I think this is kind of part and parcel with fans want things to be perfect instantaneously. There are some people that are that criticize some of the players that have just started to play. There were some people that were saying like Odegaard's a flop because he didn't do anything spectacular in his first 20 minutes at the club. And it's a whole other debate, but that almost proves the point. It's like not everything is going to be as you want it from minute one, and sometimes it takes players longer. And even though Willian has been settled in the Premier League for a while, we're not Chelsea, right? So there's a whole other dynamic that goes into switching clubs in the same league, even if it's in the same city. It's not so cut and dry all the time. So again, we can kind of revisit that, in June. Like for all we know, starting from now until the end of the season, Willian could be 50 times better than we saw the first 6 months. We don't know. We have no idea. So we can only react to what we've seen, but it doesn't mean it's doom and gloom and the club's mucked it again and he's been a complete waste and like whatever kind of storyline you want to write. So just take it a match at a time and see how it goes. So, but I mean, if he wants to perform, that's good. It doesn't mean I think he should be starting for the club, but having another good option off the bench, especially when the Europa League comes back, that's important, right? Because we are going to have to get the rotation right. So if we can rely on him to come in for a certain starts, or if he needs to have better or more minutes coming off the bench more so than 15, maybe he has to come on for 30 or 35 for whatever reason it might be. If we can rely on that moving forward, that's an important part of building the squad out. So
Yeah, I think I'm trying to get better at not just because I don't like somebody originally,
you're
just
the
kind of
worst.
like letting my biases like just totally affect my analysis of how they played in the moment. And I have to say, I think Willian did play better. My standards are low, or my expectations are low, but I did think he played better. And besides that one chance that he did have that I thought that he should have did better on, I think he did give us a little bit more in terms of keeping the ball and being more available for the overlaps and the little kind of like 1-2s that him and Cedric were doing that weren't really coming off when Martinelli was on the field. So I have another question for the chat box. And you guys just let us know if you think Arteta made the right decision subbing Martinelli off at halftime for Willian. And I'm also going to ask the two of you. Mike, do you think that was the right decision? You're muted.
Sorry. I mean, in retrospect, probably because we saw a better Willian, and I think, like I said earlier, maybe the most encouraging thing is that we now have, let's take a guess at 18 to 20 players that we're all happy to see on the field for Arsenal. And with the congested season, it's pivotal that we have that many players at least that we can put on the field. So in retrospect, it was good, as you said, Jess, that Willian did better. So probably I am super intrigued to find out what's going to happen with Martinelli. Although, and I wonder if we're going to take a look at him as a centre forward before the end of the season, because if we are going to buy a centre forward, maybe it's smart to see if that guy that has all the attributes to play there can do so. I don't think Willian's the future by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's going to be 4th or 5th down the list, but so I'm less concerned about him. But the Martinelli situation is fascinating to me.
Drew?
Yeah, I'd agree with essentially everything, especially the center forward part, because sometimes you have very good solutions to solve problems that are in-house without having to spend money. I think we're kind of in a position where we might have to look at more of those moving forward. And it's not necessarily the club's fault. We don't know how long this is going to go with COVID, with no match day revenue, like all these kind of things. If we don't get Europe, there's a lot of money we're going to be missing out on that. At least we had Europa League, money this time around, but we might not even get that next season. So, yeah, I think, and you could look at a lot of Martinelli's game because he's so forward thinking. He wants to be so direct, but he is good on the ball. He does have a physical side of his game. He can drop deep to get involved. you can look at a player and see kind of like the profile of attributes that Arteta wants in center forward in his game. He's just not being utilized there at the moment. But a lot of people have postulated when we first made the deal for him that maybe he plays wide left, but he might actually be transitioned to a center forward. He's at a good age to perpetrate that kind of thing. He's not 20 yet. So, and the fact that he's an expansive winger kind of shows that you can maybe do that. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, no, I think that in terms of the decision making, again, Drago said it just in the chat before that we were improved in the second half. Sure, it shows that it was the right move, right? And a lot of time, being a manager and being proactive at looking at a problem on the pitch tactically and fixing it immediately, especially at halftime when you can, shows that Arteta is now doing the right things again as well. You know, just because he didn't get it right in the team selection doesn't like he has to be good enough to identify the problem and then fix it the right way. Just because he could have made the wrong substitution and it could have made it worse, could have exacerbated the problem, but it didn't. He brought Willian on and we improved in a lot of different areas. So yeah, again, I think it was the right thing to do. And just because he brought in a player that a lot of people don't rate, and some people are downright making videos throwing temper tantrums about it, like it showed that it was worth it. So that's kind of what really matters.
Okay. All right. So I agree with that. And so after the game, the fan base seemed pretty split on whether we dropped 2 points or whether we gained 1. And personally, I think that all things considered, you know, that they played their strongest lineup. They're 18 games unbeaten away as well, United is. And the players that we had available or the players that we had unavailable, I think it was a fair match and a fair result. You know, they had chances, we had chances, and I view this as a point gained, you know. So I want to ask the chat box first, do you guys think that we dropped 2 points or that we gained a point? And then obviously I'm going to ask you guys. So Mike, what do you think? Did we drop 2 points or did we gain 1?
Well, that's a hard one because I found out about the game after the game, unfortunately, like I told you earlier, Jess, and so that's my emotion was disappointment when I found out. Even though I knew that 3 of our best players weren't playing, I was disappointed because, you know, 2021 Arsenal has been rather good, and I'm not a huge fan of Manchester United and their coach, and I'm not sure that they're going to remain flirting with the Championship for much longer. So I think that they were there to be beaten. However, when I watched the game, when I came home, I was just the 3 points, just the whole point thing just was secondary to me because I was so encouraged by the team's seriousness with, you know, the way they approached the game, the way they started the game, the way that they came out in the second half. And Arteta could have just gone with the first half tactics of trying to sit and contain and have a very impressive low block, and because it was working for the most part, and just continued. But he decided, no, I'm going to show confidence in these guys and we're going to go forward and we're going to push. And so there were so many things I was encouraged by that. To me, the scoreline was somewhat secondary. But I would err towards being somewhat disappointed because of that. But there were chances both ways. We had more chances, but they had better ones, perhaps, didn't they?
I think so. I think they did. Those 2 Cavani chances were closer than the Pepe chances. You know, those should have went in. So what do you think?
They weren't just closer. He had an open net on both opportunities, and he missed them both. And that's reflected by the data. Their XG was a full goal higher than our XG.
Wow, yeah.
They flirted with an XG of 2. Ours didn't even break 1.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So it showed that at least by looking at the data, they should have scored more goals. It doesn't matter who had the better run of play for the balance of the match. Like statistically, they had the better goal opportunities. Our best chances really were Pepe's 2 chances they just shot wide, and then we had Woodwork on a free kick, and that's not a very high XG chance. So with a bit of luck, maybe the match is different. But I think it's a point gained. I mean, kind of the chat box is doing a good job about pointing out really good things. It's like, yeah, you're missing your first choice left back. You're missing Oba. Saka's not there, and he's been on form, probably our best player this season. So yeah, I would say it's a point gained, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just because we were the home side doesn't matter. United were they're on merit, sitting second in the table. We can banter them all they want, or all we want rather, but they are second in the table. So, and I'm with Mike again that if you look at, there's a lot there can be some warning signs as well, but there's a lot to be like positive about that performance as well. We weren't second best throughout. In fact, we were the better team for half the match against a team who are right now better than us in terms of their run of results and how they've played overall for the majority of the season. So, yeah, it's a point gain for me. I think if our strongest 11 is there, I don't know what would have happened. I think maybe we would have had a better chance to win, but doesn't necessarily mean we would have. But and don't forget, Brent Leno made an absolutely fantastic save as well against on an effort that probably goes in against the majority of other keepers in the league. So, yeah, I would say it's a point gain for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that, with everything, considering everything, like in the games that we have coming up, like if you take the emotions out of it and you're not thinking that this is United, this is just the second best team in the country, you would take a draw. You would. I think it's just the emotional side of it being Manchester United where that comes in. We want to beat them every single time. And of course we want to win every single game, but a draw in those circumstances against their best team, everything considered, definitely a point gained. And I just want to make a point that our defense is actually good this year. I know people still have questions about it because of the personnel that are back there, not big names, but don't get it twisted. The people that are back there are actually doing really well. That includes Bellerin, that includes Holding, that includes Marie, that includes David Luiz, that includes Gabrielle, and it includes Cedric and Tierney. These players have been playing great defensively, and really as a team, we've been really good. I think we're the second best, only second to Man City as a defensive unit this season. So what really stood out to me in this game was the defense. And I know we got, Manchester United did get behind us a couple of times, but they're going to do that. But just the way we defended our lines, they were solid. It seemed like everybody knew what they were doing. I mean, I think that's one thing that Arteta doesn't get enough credit for. The one thing that people were like, we need to be more offensive. We need to be more offensive. We're too defensive. The principles that the foundation that he laid down for the last year and a half or so at Arsenal, it's showing up. It's really showing up. And, that's something that I think he needs a little bit more credit for sure. So we're into the question section. So chat box, go ahead and get your questions out there. We're going to answer as many as we can. We have about 10 more minutes. And just make it obvious that it's a question by putting a Q before it so we don't miss them. So let's see. Okay. Drew, I'll give you this one. In the summer, do you buy a left back or do you move Cedric on the left and buy a right back? Maybe buy a Lamptey or an Aarons. What do you think?
Well, I think if you believe the rumors, it looks like they're trying to focus on getting an actual backup left back and keeping faith in Bayer in there, and Cedric over there, and rotate them depending on who's in form. I feel like, again, the club are going to try to find clever ways to bring in decent players for not a lot of money right now. And again, I kind of alluded to it before. It's not just because it's not because we have stingy owners. It's because we're not making money. It's hard to spend money when you're not making any. Unless you have an open checkbook. If you're like Man City, for example. And we don't have owners that run that kind of model. So I think something like if you go and do something like Ryan Bertrand as your backup left back, who might be happy to come in and rotate and be an option, you get good, decent depth, you get experience, and then you're not worried about having someone that's going to kick up dirt if they're not starting every week. Where if you go out and buy a left back who is a bit younger, they might be a bit frustrated about not playing enough. Because it's clear that Tierney has to be first choice, but it's also clear that every now and then he does get some knocks. So you need a decent player that can come in for 1 or 2 matches here and there as a starter to rotate. That gives you something, and then I think Bertrand would kind of maybe fit the club a little bit in terms of what he offers on the pitch. So I think we'll end up doing that. That's probably what I would do as well. I'm not on the Bayern hate train. I think the guy is very underrated. I think a lot of fans, there's a lot of unjust and undue hate towards him that kind of frustrates me a little bit. He's not perfect by any means, but he's a good player. And if he's not working at the minute, I think Cedric is proving that he was also a decent get. You know, he can come in and give you some good performances as well. So I think that's probably a bit better of a balance for me. But if we for some reason sell him in the summer, then maybe someone like Lamptey or Aaron, someone I would look at, but only if we were to sell, Hector for whatever reason. So yeah.
Okay, Mike, do you have anything to add to that? Any ideas on the left back, right back situation that we have going on here?
Yeah, sure. I would switch in the summer, and I would sell Hector Bellerin because he's a player that we can get money for. There's not many, as Drew said. We don't have money, and we're probably going to have to go through a season where these loans and terminating contracts and such are, and players running out their contracts are going to continue. So, and I'm not. I think Hector Bellerin, like Drew says, is a good player. I think, and he's not a priority. I think our midfield still needs to be our priority this summer. So I'd be happy if he stayed. But if I had open season on it, I would sell Hector Bellerin because I've always thought he's a 7 out of 10 defender and a 6 out of 10 attacker, and I think Arsenal deserve better. I think he'd be okay as a backup, but I don't think he complements our current flock of players on the right who all seem to want to cut inside, be it Saka or Pepe or Odegaard, and that's where Hector Bellerin likes to be too. He likes to come inside with the ball and play inside, and of course some of that's under instruction. So I just don't think he complements either. And I suppose my biggest point there is I've just been frustrated for just too long with a player who finds himself on the wing, has got natural God-given athleticism and speed, and clearly has not spent any time on the training field trying to develop a change of pace, change of direction, a trick, a way to beat his fullback. He looks petrified when he gets the ball when somebody's standing in front of him, and too passive and subservient and just passes it backwards almost every single time. And I know that he's more of an off-the-ball runner. I totally get that, and that's how he finds himself in the final third. But I think with his years being at one of the top clubs in Europe, he should have more tools in his box. And I suppose it bothers me too much to think that he hasn't made the effort to work on his one-on-one game when he plays 60% of every game for Arsenal on the right wing. So I would upgrade there. The left back that I'm most interested in, I think Drew probably knows him too, is Borna Sosa. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's Stuttgart's left wing back. Not sure I've ever seen him play left back, but he's far better attacking player than he is a defensive one. But I think with a good coach like Arteta, I think that there's a cheaper option. I think we're trying to be real here. I'd love to give you a fancier name, but this guy would probably cost less than 10 million. I think he's a Croatian international, and I really like him to play on the left. And if we did get a right back, then Tariq Lamptey is the one that I would most certainly go for, Jess.
Okay. I agree with both sides. I think Drew knows how I feel about Bellerin, so I'm not going to go into my Bellerin spiel. But that was good, you guys. That was good. So I'm going to stick with you, Mike, on this one. What do we do with Eddie and Laka in the summer? Because they both will have a year left on their contracts. Sell them, keep them, extend them. What do you think?
That is so interesting because the opinions are changing all the time. Drew said earlier that Lacazette deserves to play, deserves to start. He's correct in my opinion. And he came up with a really interesting scenario, which might be the best of all worlds, is you at least offer him a 1 year. And if you offer him in 1 year and maybe he's not your first choice, then maybe he holds his value a little better and we can get something for him if it doesn't work out. But it's hard looking at him now at how he's connecting with the others so well and looking like he works so well with the younger players to think about ditching him. Yeah, Arsenal have been pretty pathetic at selling players at their optimum or at the right time. And so there's the other half of me that says maybe it's time to cash in. And I'm a fan of Odson Edouard and Patson Daka as a couple of that I'm looking at. And the guy at Sociedad, I never know how to pronounce his name, Oyathabal, maybe. I think he plays as a false nine, and I think a false nine would work so well in our system. So I'm so torn, and I don't want to commit on that one because I think it's fair to wait and see how this thing pans out in the hope that Lacazette isn't conning us into just getting a new contract and then he's going to, sit on the beach like Mr. William.
Okay.
And Eddie as well. So I didn't mention Eddie. I think Eddie's a super sub. I just don't think he fits what we're trying to do from the start ever, really. And until we develop a team where we're going around the outside and hitting zone 14 and cutting the ball back into the 6-yard box regularly, I see no point in him starting. So again, probably if I'm the decision maker, I think sell him whilst we can get 20 to 30 million for him. And that's a shame that I feel that way. Love to see Balogun. I think he's probably got a higher ceiling, and ideally, Jess, I think how good would it be if we could loan Eddie now, get his value up, get him to score some goals in the championship, give Balogun his sub minutes, get Balogun to sign a contract. So we've secured that. And I think this guy's got a higher ceiling.
I agree with that. If you've been watching the channel or any show I've been on in the last couple of weeks, you know how I feel about Eddie and Laka and really the striker situation altogether. So again, I won't go into mine, but that was a great answer, Mike. Thank you for answering that. So I'm going to go to Drew on this one. Do you think Arteta wants to play with a number 10, or would he prefer to play with a slightly deeper creative center midfielder like Kevin De Bruyne style?
I don't know, because I think Arteta's proving that he's able to institute different tactical schematics depending on who he really has available to him. Like we weren't, despite that we had Ozil in the team, we weren't using really a 10. And then Emile Smith Rowe came back to fitness, and now we're using a 10. But Smith Rowe's not being tasked like a normal 10. He's not just sitting in the hole waiting for possession. He's roaming constantly. So I don't think he wants to use an out-and-out 10 at all. And I think that's almost kind of why, as much as I love him over the course of his career, I kind of feel like maybe that's why he wasn't playing. Because I think Smith Rowe's tasks are a bit more expensive. It's not just trying to get on the ball. He's also dragging defenders. It's almost like he's almost kind of playing like a second striker instead of a 10, which is different.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say maybe you're looking at maybe that kind of iteration. Maybe he wants a player and just behind the striker who is going to almost, being a 10 and being a second striker, you take up this first initial position is the same thing, but the way you operate when you don't have the ball is very different.
Right.
So I feel like that might be maybe what he's looking for. And using someone like that is what allows you to kind of get teams out of their shape. It's what allows for that really good combination play we've seen. We've seen Smith Rowe pop up on wide right. We've seen him on left. He's dropped deeper. He's gotten to the end line. He's on the touchline. He's kind of been everywhere when he's played. Normal traditional 10s don't operate that way. So I don't think he wants to use a 10. And you can maybe say that even De Bruyne doesn't really operate like that either. He's now more of an 8 that becomes a 10 with a bit more mobility. But I think it's almost like the way he's using Smith Rowe is more of like something that we haven't really seen at Arsenal in a long time for me. So I don't really know how he wants to do that moving forward. I honest to God couldn't tell you. But I would say that whoever isn't, and I think that's why we went for Odegaard as well, because Odegaard, he has played wide left and wide right and as a 10 and as an 8 over the course of his career. And he's shown himself to be astute in all those positions. And when you have players that have played in those positions, it gives them better tactical understanding when they're in the final third of how to roam and what positions to take up and what zones to attack and where to come for the ball. So I think you're looking at two of those kind of very, very, very mobile attacking players who it's almost like they don't have a set position, really. They go where the space is, and that's kind of like, and I'm actually kind of scheming to write a piece about this for your Arsenal, so be aware in this about how you're looking at Smith Rowe as almost kind of like our own Raumdeuter, but not but a little bit different. So Raumdeuter just means space creator. So and everyone knows that from Thomas Müller, where he coined himself as that. But this is a little bit different as well. So I feel like that's what you're kind of looking for, because if you see how Smith Rowe has been playing, he's essentially going where no one else has been. Like when Saka comes in, Smith Rowe is going to where the other spaces, they're not occupying the same zone. That's too easy to defend. He's going where there's other space. And even there's been so many times he's not been getting the ball, but he's still making those runs because he's trying to get teams out of their shape. And we haven't really had that in a while, in a very long time. And I think that's been the biggest key addition for me in Smith Rowe's game is not what he's been doing on the ball, it's what he's been doing off the ball.
Right.
That's vital, especially in the way the game is being played currently. Movement is everything. It's what makes people like Jack Grealish so good. You know, he's so good on the ball, but Grealish, there's more to his game when he doesn't have the ball as well, which is, I think, is really important. De Bruyne is the same thing. I think that's why he kind of almost re-revolutionized, the 10 when he first came in, when he's been getting as much as he has, because he's been so good off the ball. And he has such a good tackle and intelligent understanding of play when he's not on it. I think you see that from Smith Rowe, and hopefully you'll see that from Odegaard as well if he gets his chance. That for me is kind of different. So I don't think he's going to play with the 10 at all. I think you might have to find another way to define it for me. So, yeah.
Okay. I agree. So this is going to be our last question before we just quickly run around and say who our man of the match was for our game against Manchester United. But the question is going to be, let's see. Torreira or Guendouzi, if you had to choose one to keep, which one would you keep, Drew? You have to choose.
No, I don't. And I want to choose them. I don't want either of them. Honestly, I honestly feel like we should bin both. For two reasons. One, it would give us money that we'd be able to reinvest. But two, I just feel like Torreira is as good as he was for Samp and as good as he was for Uruguay. I just don't think he's gonna be the type of six we need. It's not that he's a bad player, because he played out and out DM for both those clubs, for Samp and Uruguay. He hasn't really gotten that chance, but I don't think we're going to be. I just don't see us using an out-and-out defensive midfielder in this system. I don't think we're going to do it, which is why we went for Partey. You know, even if we get Basuma, I think Basuma is going to be. He's good on the ball. He can push play himself. You know, he has some creativity. I think he's a more expensive player than Torreira as well. So it's not that I don't like Torreira. I just don't think he's going to fit what we want. So you may as well get rid. That's it. You know, and there's no harm, no foul. For Guendouzi, he's already having problems at Hertha with his attitude when he's been on loan, and I think his performances for Hertha have been overstated. I think people have looked at him and said that he's been doing well because he's been doing things that no one in Hertha's midfield can do, but he himself has not actually been that consistent in terms of his level of performances. And I just feel like his attitude is as such where I just wouldn't want to deal with it. From a coaching standpoint, I wouldn't want to deal with it. You're better. There are other clubs who will want him. So you may as well kind of. I think it's just more of you cut ties. We have two young midfielders coming through. You know, you have Aziz, you have Sirhan. Those are two players who can slot into midfield. You know, for depth, you give them the Europa League minutes. You get them in and around the first team more regularly. I'd rather persist with developing them than worrying about Guendouzi personally. And if you sell some people like Torreira and Guendouzi, then you can maybe go out and afford someone like Basuma. And like Mike said, I agree. Like sorting out the midfield is of desperate importance. And as much as I do think Xhaka can bring to the team, there are times where you want someone in the midfield who isn't Granit Xhaka. And again, that's no fault of his own. You just want something more. So that for me would be how I would handle it. I'd sell them both. I'd go out and get someone like Basuma, and then I would promote full time someone like Aziz or Sterian, and then have them training with the team, giving them Europa League minutes, giving them the rotation, and having another academy product that can maybe show they can do long term as well. So, yeah.
Mike, what do you think?
I totally agree. No chance, either of them. It's a shame on Torreira. I like the guy. I think he's in the wrong league. I think Arsenal needed a more athletic, maybe a taller player, and I don't think he's in the right league. So I think you have to sell and get what you can there. Guendouzi, no chance for me. We can make some money on him. He's one of a few we can. And some mug will probably buy him. I think he's obviously got talent, but to me, Guendouzi thinks he's a superhero, and I don't appreciate that as a player. I don't want a midfielder to be a superhero. I play central midfield and I coach, and one of the main things we teach is scanning and having the ability to know your one-touch option when the ball comes to you. Guendouzi doesn't do that. He doesn't tie his hair back, which bothers me. Maybe that's just too specific. But I mean, you can't possibly have good peripheral vision. You can't possibly have good peripheral vision if you're playing central midfield and you've got hair. Your hair is out here, and you've got to be able to see in the corners there to be able to play one touch. And the fact he won't pin his hair back and makes it up as he goes along when he gets the ball, so he doesn't have a one-touch option, I think he's vastly overrated. And he's the superhero because I think he doesn't want to do any of that stuff because he wants to, be the guy that everybody says, wow, how did you get out of that mess? Oh, man, you just did that again. You just got out of that mess. And football's not that complicated. And he unnecessarily complicates it. I like what Drew said about the academy. I think Aziz is a far better option. He's, of course, a little younger than Guendouzi, and I think he'll be in the squad next year. So my midfield, my fantasy midfield, Jess, and I've been thinking about this, is bringing Basuma in and having Anguissa as an option. I think Zambo Anguissa is his name at Fulham. He has everything in his toolbox. He can drive with the ball. He's got that one-touch option. He's athletic. He's strong. He's physical. He's Premier League ready, as is Basuma. Basuma actually played as a attacking midfielder early in his career. I just found that out. That was interesting. So I think Arteta wants a hybrid team where he can switch them in-game, game to game, and these guys can do that for him. And then the last thing I'd say is I also think that there's a strong possibility, maybe even this season, that we play what Drew was talking about, take the 10 away, play the three-man midfield, and then against the weaker teams where you can just leave Thomas Partey sitting, and I agree with Drew, he's not a defensive midfielder, but he's the best we've got right now. You sit him and you play Ødegaard and Smith Rowe, as you said, Jess, like De Bruyne and Silva, because that's what City did. That's what Arteta knows is possible when you're ball dominant, is that you can play with, you got an Ødegaard and David Silva. There's a direct comparison there, and Smith Rowe and De Bruyne, well, they've already been compared, and they have a very similar game. You can't do that unless you're ball dominant. And then moving forward, if you had a Basuma sitting, and then you had Partey maybe to his right, and one of Ødegaard or Smith Rowe, that would work. Then there's all kinds of good options there.
Yes. I think the thought in this, in this show has been options. The fact that we, moving forward, will have options, which is a good thing. So really quickly, just both of you guys give me your man of the match. Who is your man of the match, Drew?
I hate you right now.
Why? What'd I do?
It's difficult because I don't think one player necessarily performed better than everybody else. I feel like we had 3 or 4 players that kind of equally performed quite well. If I had to pick one,
because you do,
I'd probably say Xhaka. Actually, I think he actually played very well. I think he's actually been showing why he keeps being selected. And it's not that he had a world-class performance. Like, I think people think man of the match, and I think you had to get a 10 out of 10. It's just the best one that was there. It could have been a 7 out of 10, but it was better than all the other 6 out of 10s. That's what man of the match means. It just means he was your best player on that particular day. So for me, I think it was Xhaka. I think a good shout to David Luiz. I think he performed well again. It's kind of funny because fans keep lamenting him being selected in the starting 11, but he keeps performing. So I would go with Xhaka for me. That'd be my choice.
Mike, what about you?
Well, as per Drew's criteria, which I would go with too, I'd say David Luiz was the man of the match. But, my heart would want to give a round of applause to Cedric for yet again putting in a very good shift and performance at left back. But Pepe, I suppose, because I've never seen him not give the ball away an entire 90 minutes. I think maybe once he did, and he was a consistent threat the entire 90 minutes. So I suppose if I was his coach and I had to give a trophy, David Luiz probably knows that he did well, and Pepe needs a pat on the back. So I'd give it to Pepe and say, do that again, buddy. And if you do that again, you'll play. And the club's got the pressure. He's the only guy that comes with that massive pressure that Arteta knows he's got to make something of the 72 million man. And we can't afford to sell him for 25. And he probably knows that. So Arteta probably wants to play him, doesn't he?
All right. Well, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that my man of the match was Jaka. So there's that. I thought he had a great game. So you guys, that's it for the show. So Drew, can you tell everybody where to find you on the internet?
If they read the little awesome bar on their screen, that's where you can find me on Twitter. And then on my Twitter, I have listed on my Twitter all the outlets that I currently write or podcast for. So there'll be a lot of stuff coming out like over the next couple of weeks. So just, I guess, keep an eye out for that. And I always appreciate any interaction on Twitter, as long as it's respectful, because I have very minimal patience for nonsense. So, but again, anyone who ever reads or retweets, I really do appreciate that. So it means a lot to me. So thank you.
And Mike, where can they find you?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you for having me on. I super appreciate it. And to meet Drew is an honor because he's got all kinds of wisdom beyond the norm. That's for darn sure. So that was fantastic. For me, I write for Gunnerstown after every game. I have a column I've developed called Positives, Needs and Hopes, which is a slightly different way of looking at the game after the game. I also do the Gunnerstown post-match pub podcast sometimes. I do the transfer blogs for LeGrove, which I've just done a couple at Christmas time on a striker for next season, the creative midfielder. And I do quizzes for the Mr. Arsenal channel, the Who Am I quizzes, which are wacky and fun. So they're the 4 places that I'll be.
Okay, you guys, before you go, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and in the comment section, let us know who your man of the match was. I'm Jessica. I've been your host. You can follow me on Twitter at It's Jessinho, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.